You're worthless. You'll own nothing and beg on the streets. The words, sharp as shattered glass, still echoed in the opulent hallway even after the heavy oak door slammed shut, rattling the expensive, hideous vase on the console table Beatrice treasured. I stood there for a second, the sound of physical blow. My name is Isabel, or, well, it was, Isabel Diaz. Now, just Isabel. Will, my husband, ex-husband, I guess, as of about 10 minutes ago, hadn't even flinched. He just stood beside his mother, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. That same smirk he'd had when he told me Beatrice thought it was time for a change. A change. Like I was a set of drapes she'd grown tired of. He looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on the simple dress I wore. The one Beatrice had always said made me look provincial. Mother's right, you know, Will had said, his voice smooth and unconcerned, as if discussing the weather. This is for the best. You were never really cut out for this life, were you? I clutched the small cardboard box tighter. It wasn't much. A few clothes Beatrice hadn't deemed worthy of her son's new life, a couple of sentimental trinkets she'd probably missed in her sweep of my things, my mother's locket, a worn copy of my favorite book, and the dignity I was desperately trying to keep from crumbling onto their imported marble floor. The box felt flimsy, pathetic, a symbol of the life they'd so casually discarded. I didn't cry, not then. Tears felt like a luxury I couldn't afford, a weakness they'd lap up. Instead, a strange calmness settled over me, cold and sharp. I turned, my heels clicking with the steadiness I didn't feel, and walked towards the elevator. I could feel their eyes on my back, Beatrice's filled with contempt, Will's with a detached sort of pity that was almost worse. I even managed a small smile, a tiny, almost imperceptible curve of my lips, as the polished brass doors slid closed, cutting off the sight of their triumphant faces. That smile wasn't for them. It was for me. A promise. The city air hit me like a slap when I stepped out of the grand, ridiculously ostentatious apartment building. Their building. For now. The doorman, George, who'd always been kind, always slipped me an extra cookie when Beatrice wasn't looking, offered a hesitant, sympathetic nod. "Miss Isabel," he began, his voice low. I couldn't meet his eyes. "It's okay, George," I managed, my voice surprisingly even. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I walked, just walked, no destination in mind, just away. Away from the suffocating scent of Beatrice's expensive perfume. Opulence, she called it fittingly, and Will's casual cruelty. Each step was a tiny rebellion. They expected me to shatter, to dissolve into a puddle of tears and recriminations right there on their manicured sidewalk. I could almost hear Beatrice's satisfied sigh. My feet eventually led me to a part of town I rarely visited, the kind of place where the buildings were grittier, the laughter louder, more real, the kind of place with flickering neon signs and the lingering smell of stale beer and desperation. I found a motel, the sign for vacancy blinking erratically, one letter dark. The room cost me nearly a third of the cash I had stuffed in my pocket, cash I'd taken from the housekeeping envelope Beatrice so generously provided each month. The one she always made a point of saying was, "More than enough for someone like you, dear, with your simple needs." The room was grim, a threadbare carpet the color of mud, a buzzing fluorescent light in the tiny bathroom that cast ghoulish shadows, and a bedspread that had seen better decades. I dropped the box on the stained linoleum floor. The silence was deafening after the constant, carefully curated noise of Beatrice's world. The classical music always playing softly, the hushed tones of her important phone calls, the endless chatter about her society friends. Why had they done it? It wasn't just about Will wanting someone new, someone younger, someone Beatrice probably handpicked from a catalog of suitable heiresses. Sienna, I think her name was, the one I'd seen him having business lunches with. No, this was personal. Beatrice had always seen me as an interloper, someone not good enough for her precious son, her perfect lineage. I didn't come from money, not their kind of money anyway. My family had been comfortable, loving, but not connected. And then, after my parents died last year, after the small inheritance I'd received was, shall we say, absorbed into Will's business ventures, Beatrice's idea, of course, to keep it in the family, dear, I became even less valuable, a liability, a reminder of a life they wanted to erase. They'd used my grief, my vulnerability, twisted it, and then, when I was at my lowest, they'd struck. Beatrice had even said, during one of her tirades, "Your grief is so unbecoming, Isabel. It's dragging Will down." I sank onto the lumpy bed, the springs groaning in protest. The humiliation washed over me then, hot and sickening. Beatrice's voice, that high-pitched shriek, "You'll own nothing and beg on the streets." It wasn't just a threat, it was a curse, a pronouncement. She truly believed it. Will, standing there, letting her say it, agreeing with it by his silence and that infuriating smirk. My hands clenched, nails digging into my palms. The calm I'd felt earlier was still there, but now it was different, colder, harder. It wasn't the calm of shock anymore. It was the calm of absolute, unwavering resolve. I pushed myself off the bed and walked to the cracked mirror above the cheap dresser. The woman staring back was a stranger. Her eyes were too wide, shadowed with pain, her face pale, but there was something else there too, something new. A flicker in the depths, not fear, not despair. It was focus, a dangerous glint. They thought they broke me, I whispered to my reflection, my voice raspy. The words hung in the stale air of that miserable room. They have no idea what they just unleashed. A plan, vague at first, then sharpening with every passing second, began to form. They wanted me to have nothing? Fine. I had nothing to lose. And that, I realized, made me dangerous. They wanted me to beg? Oh, someone would be begging, all right. But it wouldn't be me. My mind, usually a whirlwind of anxiety and attempts to please, felt startlingly clear. I picked up my phone. 1 bar of signal. Good enough. My fingers flew across the screen, dialing a number I knew by heart, the only person in the world I could trust without reservation. Naomi? It's Isabel. My voice cracked slightly on my name. You're not going to believe what just happened. The story had just begun. Their ending, however, was already written in the ice forming around my heart, and I was going to enjoy every single chapter of their downfall. Isabel? Oh my God, what's wrong? You sound awful. Naomi's voice, usually so calm and collected in a courtroom, was sharp with concern. I took a shaky breath. They threw me out, Naomi. Will and Beatrice. Just out, like trash. The words tumbled out, a torrent of disbelief and raw pain. I told her everything. Beatrice's shrieking pronouncement, Will's smirk, the tiny box of my belongings, the grim motel room. There was a stunned silence on the other end, then a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. That absolute, I can't even say it, and Will just let her? I'm coming to get you, right now. Text me the address of that hellhole. You don't have to. Isabel, Naomi cut me off, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. I'm your best friend. Of course I have to. Pack your box. I'll be there in 20. True to her word, Naomi's sleek, sensible sedan pulled up to the motel curb less than half an hour later. She jumped out, her lawyerly composure momentarily forgotten, and enveloped me in a fierce hug. You're staying with me, she stated, grabbing my box before I could protest. Indefinitely. Naomi's apartment was a sanctuary of calm and order, a stark contrast to the chaos of the last 24 hours and the oppressive grandeur of Beatrice's domain. It was small but bright, filled with books and plants, and smelled faintly of coffee and lemon polish. She settled me on her comfortable sofa, made me a cup of strong tea, and then, with a notepad and pen, transformed back into Naomi the lawyer. "Okay," she said, her expression serious. "The divorce. Did you sign anything?" I shook my head. "It all happened so fast. Will just said his lawyer would be in touch. He mentioned something about a generous settlement Beatrice had approved to avoid any unpleasantness." Naomi snorted. "Generous to them, I'm sure. We need to see what they're offering, but knowing Beatrice, it'll be insulting." "Did you contribute to the household financially? Any joint assets besides the apartment, which I assume is in Will's name, or more likely Beatrice's?" "My inheritance," I said, the words tasting like ash. "After my parents, Will said it would be safer invested in his new tech startup. Beatrice agreed, said it was a smart move for our future." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "We'll look into that. It sounds suspiciously like coercion, but for now, focus on you. You're safe here." The next few days were a blur of shame and simmering anger. The shame was a constant companion, whispering that Beatrice was right, that I was worthless. But the anger, that was new. It was a cold, steady burn, fueling a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. I had about $200 left to my name. My generous settlement papers arrived via courier a week later. Naomi read them, her lips tightening into a thin line. "This is a joke, Izzy," she said, tossing the documents onto her coffee table. "They're offering you a one-time payment of $5,000, and you have to sign an NDA thicker than a phone book, promising never to speak about them or the circumstances of the marital dissolution." "5,000? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "That wouldn't even cover a month's rent in that mausoleum they call home." "Exactly," Naomi said. "We fight this, but it'll take time, and money for legal fees, which I'll cover for now, don't worry. In the meantime, I said, my voice hard, "I need to start making my own money." Naomi looked at me, a flicker of concern in her eyes. "What are you thinking?" "Remember all those business plans I drafted for Will? The market research I did for his brilliant ideas? The financial projections Beatrice said were too complicated for her to understand, but always seemed to work out?" Naomi nodded slowly. "You were the brains behind half his so-called successes. They never gave you an ounce of credit." "Exactly," I said. "I still have those skills. I'll start freelancing, discreetly, consulting, planning, whatever I can get. I need capital, Naomi. Lots of it." And so I began. From Naomi's spare room, armed with her old laptop and a fierce determination, I started building a new life, one penny at a time. I took on small, anonymous projects, crafting business strategies for startups, analyzing market trends for small companies, ghostwriting financial reports. The work was demanding, the hours long, but every dollar earned was a small victory, a tiny chip taken out of the mountain of their arrogance. I lived frugally, saving every cent. Instant noodles became a staple. New clothes were out of the question. My only indulgence was good coffee, a habit I refused to break. When I wasn't working, I was researching. I became obsessed with Will and Beatrice, their finances, their social circle, their routines, and most importantly, their apartment building, the Grandview Towers, a monument to old money and new pretensions. I spent hours online, digging through public records, property databases, news articles. I learned about its history, its amenities, its other wealthy residents. It was their fortress, their symbol of status. And it was going to be my first target. One late night, fueled by cheap coffee and an insatiable hunger for information, I was scrolling through a dense property ownership database. Most of it was straightforward: holding companies, trusts, the usual opaque structures the wealthy use. But then I saw it. a tiny footnote on a decades-old deed transfer related to the land the Grandview was built on. A name I didn't recognize, linked to a shell corporation that seemed to have dissolved years ago, but its initial stake was never fully accounted for in subsequent transfers. It was almost certainly nothing, a historical artifact, a dead end. But it felt off, a loose thread in an otherwise impeccably woven tapestry. It was a loose thread, I thought, a tiny, cold smile playing on my lips, and I was going to pull it until their whole world unraveled. The image was so vivid, so satisfying. Beatrice's perfectly ordered life, her smug certainty, all coming undone because of one insignificant detail she, in her infinite arrogance, had overlooked. This was just the beginning. The loose thread, that forgotten name, became my obsession. It led me down a rabbit hole of archived city planning documents and obscure business registries. Most of it was dry, impenetrable stuff, but I devoured it. Naomi would find me at 3 a.m., surrounded by printouts, muttering about zoning variances from the 1970s. "Izzy, you need to sleep," she'd say, gently prying a faded microfiche scan from my hand. "Almost there now," I'd mumble. "I just feel like there's something here." Meanwhile, my freelance work was quietly taking off. I set up a simple, anonymous website, Phoenix Strategic Solutions. No name, no face, just a list of services: financial forecasting, risk assessment, competitive analysis, the kind of things Will used to present as his own genius after I'd spent weeks slaving over them. Turns out, there was a market for competent, discreet help. My first few clients were small, referrals from online forums. I undercharged and over-delivered. Word spread. Soon I was juggling multiple projects, working 16-hour days, fueled by an endless supply of coffee and the burning image of Beatrice's face when her world came crashing down. Every penny I earned went into a separate account I mentally dubbed the Phoenix Fund. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building an arsenal. One afternoon, sifting through old contacts from my parents' address book, a relic from a happier, simpler time, I came across a name, Yusuf Quinn. He'd been a younger colleague of my father's, a quiet, thoughtful man who'd attended my parents' funeral and expressed his condolences with a sincerity that had touched me even in my grief. I remembered my father saying Yusuf had a knack for real estate, a quiet integrity that was rare in that world. He'd started his own small development company years ago. On impulse, I looked him up. Quinn Developments was still around, low profile but respected, known for smart, ethical projects. Taking a deep breath, I drafted an email, carefully sanitizing my situation, framing my interest as a desire to learn more about real estate investment, a potential career shift. I mentioned my father, hoping the connection would resonate. To my surprise, Yusuf replied within a day, inviting me for coffee. We met at a small independent cafe, far from the glitzy haunts Beatrice favored. Yusuf hadn't changed much. His dark hair was now flecked with gray at the temples, and his eyes held a wisdom that was both kind and shrewd. "Isabel," he said, his voice warm, "it's good to see you. I was so sorry to hear about your parents. They were wonderful people." "Thank you, Yusuf. That means a lot." We talked for a while, reminiscing about my father, before he gently steered the conversation to my email. "So, real estate. That's quite a change from, well, whatever it was Will had you doing." He said it without judgment, but I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. The Diaz family, it seemed, had a certain reputation. I didn't pour out the whole sordid tale of my eviction. Not yet. But I told him I was looking for a new path, something where I could build my own success. I spoke about my research into property, my interest in understanding market dynamics. I even hinted at my Phoenix Fund, framing it as seed capital for a future venture. Yusuf listened intently, asking sharp, insightful questions. He didn't patronize me or dismiss my ambitions as a whim. He saw the steel beneath the surface, the hunger I was trying to mask. "You have a good mind for this, Isabel," he said finally, steepling his fingers. "Your father always said you were the smart one." He paused. "The Diaz family. They own that rather gaudy penthouse in the Grandview Towers, don't they?" My heart skipped a beat. "Yes, they do." Yusuf nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Interesting building. Prime location. But I've heard whispers. The owner of that whole portfolio, a fellow named Harrison Ward, has been sailing a bit too close to the wind financially for some time now." My breath caught. "What do you mean? Do you—" "Ward overextended himself a few years back," Yusuf explained, his voice dropping slightly. "Took on too much debt, made some bad bets. The vultures have been circling for a while, but he's proud, trying to keep it quiet. From what my sources tell me, he's going to have to unload that portfolio, and soon. Probably discreetly, to avoid a fire sale that would spook his lenders." My mind raced. This was it. The opportunity. Far bigger, far sooner than I could have ever hoped. "The Grandview, it would be part of that portfolio?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Yusuf met my gaze, and I knew he saw more than just polite interest. He saw the glint of something fierce. Indeed, the crown jewel, in fact. But acquiring something like that, Isabel, it's not for the faint of heart. Ward is desperate, but the players who'll be bidding are sharks. Big ones. A slow, predatory smile spread across my face, one I didn't try to hide. "Oh, I'm learning to swim, Yusuf. Fast." He returned the smile, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "I have a feeling you are. Tell me, Isabel, this Phoenix Fund of yours, how fast can it grow wings?" The game had just changed, and with Yusuf potentially in my corner, I wasn't just pulling a loose thread anymore. I was preparing to seize the entire tapestry. "Wings take time, Yusuf," I said, stirring my now cold coffee, "but I'm a fast learner, and I'm not afraid of heights." Yusuf chuckled, a dry, appreciative sound. "Good, because the air gets thin up there." He leaned forward. "If Ward's portfolio comes on the market, it won't be advertised on the front page. It'll be a quiet word in the right ears. You'll need to be ready with the serious capital and an impeccable offer, and you'll need a vehicle, something that doesn't scream recently divorced woman seeking revenge." "A shell company," I said, the pieces clicking into place. "Precisely. Untraceable. Professional. Something with a bit of bite." We brainstormed names right there in the cafe. Phoenix Properties was too obvious. Isabel Investments was out of the question. Then it hit me. A name that resonated with the cold fury still simmering beneath my carefully constructed composure. "Nemesis Properties," I said, a small, satisfied smile touching my lips. Yusuf raised an eyebrow, then a slow grin spread across his face. "Nemesis, I like it. Fitting." Over the next few months, under Yusuf's quiet guidance, Nemesis Properties was born. A legally sound, utterly anonymous entity. He helped me navigate the complexities, introduced me to a discreet accountant, and showed me how to structure things for maximum privacy and efficiency. My Phoenix Fund, bolstered by increasingly lucrative freelance contracts, became the initial operating capital for Nemesis. "You need to build a track record, Isabel," Yusuf advised, "even a small one. Before you can even think about bidding on something like the Grandview, you need to show you can play the game." So I started small. Yusuf, through his network, found a couple of distressed properties, a small, run-down commercial building in an up-and-coming neighborhood, and a duplex that had been repossessed. They weren't glamorous, nothing like the opulent world Beatrice inhabited, but they were opportunities. I threw myself into it. I learned about zoning laws, renovation costs, tenant negotiations. I spent weekends poring over blueprints and spreadsheets, evenings walking through dusty, neglected buildings, picturing their potential. The first flip was terrifying. I put almost every penny Nemesis had into renovating the commercial building. There were moments I lay awake in Naomi's spare room, heart pounding, convinced I'd made a catastrophic mistake. But Yusuf's calm confidence was infectious. Trust your numbers, Isabel, and trust your gut. The commercial building sold for a modest but clean profit. Then the duplex. I reinvested everything, each success a small, sharp thrill, a taste of the power I was accumulating. I learned to be ruthless in negotiations, to spot a weakness, to push for the best deal. The soft, accommodating Isabel, who had tried so desperately to please Will and Beatrice, was fading, replaced by someone harder, more focused. Sometimes, late at night, after closing a deal or securing a new contract, I'd allow myself a moment. I'd pull up social media, a carefully curated, anonymous account, of course. Beatrice was still insufferable, posting endless photos of her charity luncheons, her designer outfits, her smug pronouncements about good taste and proper breeding. Will was there too, often by her side, looking handsome and vacuous. And then there was Sienna Lewis, younger, blonder, with a smile that looked permanently affixed. She was always draped on Will's arm, her finger sporting a diamond that could probably choke a small horse. Their engagement photos were everywhere, sickeningly sweet, staged moments of bliss. Beatrice in the comments gushed about welcoming such a delightful, well-bred young woman into the family. The implication was clear. Sienna was everything I wasn't. The sight of them, so happy, so oblivious, so utterly convinced of their own superiority, would send a fresh wave of icy rage through me. It wasn't jealousy. It was fuel. Every smug photo, every condescending comment from Beatrice just hardened my resolve. One evening, I was at a cheap diner, celebrating a particularly challenging deal I'd just closed for Nemesis. It had involved outmaneuvering a much larger, more established firm for a small office building. The profit was significant. I'd signed the final papers that afternoon, the ink still feeling fresh, symbolic. As I ate my greasy burger, a rare treat, I scrolled through my burner phone. Every signature, every dollar, I thought, taking a bite, is a nail in their comfortable coffin. The thought brought a grim satisfaction. Then a news alert popped up. A local society blog, the kind Beatrice probably read religiously. Local Cyan Will Diaz announces engagement to socialite Sienna Lewis at lavish party. There was a picture, Will beaming, Sienna looking radiant, Beatrice standing beside them, practically glowing with triumph. The burger suddenly tasted like ash. The rage, fresh and sharp, cut through my quiet triumph. It wasn't enough to build my own success. It wasn't enough to just survive. I wanted them to feel it, to understand what they had done, to lose what they valued most. I paid my bill, my hand steady, but my heart was pounding a familiar rhythm of cold fury. The game was far from over, and I was more determined than ever to win. Nemesis Properties was growing, and soon it would be ready to hunt much bigger prey. My success with Nemesis Properties was a double-edged sword. The more I accumulated, the more I had to lose if my identity was revealed too soon. I was living a double life. By day, the anonymous, ruthlessly efficient head of a burgeoning property firm. By night, Isabel, the quiet, frugal roommate still sleeping on Naomi's sofa bed. The strain was immense, but the thought of Beatrice's face kept me going. To supplement the Phoenix Fund and keep my ear to the ground in Beatrice's world, I'd occasionally take on high-end catering gigs. My mother had taught me to cook, not just everyday meals, but elegant, sophisticated dishes. It was a skill Beatrice had once dismissed as quaint, but hardly useful for a modern woman. Now it was a tool. These events were a calculated risk. I wore a plain uniform, a simple cap to obscure my hair, and kept my head down, observing. One Saturday afternoon, I was working a lavish charity luncheon at a botanical garden, one of Beatrice's pet causes. I was arranging canapes on a silver tray when I heard that voice. High-pitched, imperious, dripping with condescension. "Oh, look, Will, darling. It seems some people are finally finding their level." My blood ran cold. I didn't have to look up to know it was Beatrice. I could feel her eyes boring into me. I kept my gaze fixed on the tiny salmon puffs, my hands steady despite the sudden tremor that ran through me. "Mother, please," Will mumbled, sounding uncomfortable. I risked a tiny glance from under the brim of my cap. He looked flustered, avoiding eye contact not just with me, but with everyone around them. Sienna, beside him, looked confused, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knitting together. Beatrice, however, was relentless. "Well, it's true, isn't it? Some people are just better suited to serving than to, well, other things." She let out a tinkling, malicious laugh that made my stomach clench. I wanted to hurl the tray of canapes at her perfectly coiffed head. I wanted to scream, but I did neither. I simply finished arranging the salmon puffs, picked up the tray, and said in a polite, neutral voice, "Excuse me, madam." I brushed past them, my heart hammering against my ribs, and disappeared into the bustling kitchen. It was a close call. Too close. The humiliation was a fresh, stinging wound, but beneath it, the cold fury solidified further. She hadn't recognized me, not really. She'd seen a caterer, a nobody, and her ingrained snobbery had simply kicked in. But the risk was undeniable. I had to be more careful, more covert. A few weeks later, Nemesis Properties was in the final stages of acquiring a small boutique hotel. It was a good deal, a solid addition to my growing portfolio. Unbeknownst to me, Will had recently, through one of Beatrice's connections, landed a junior executive role at a rival development company, a company that was also, it turned out, bidding on the same hotel. Yusuf called me, his voice urgent. "Isabel, we have a problem, a potentially big one." "What is it?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "The due diligence team from Stonebridge Capital, your rival bidder for the hotel. They've been making some unusually deep inquiries into Nemesis's ownership structure. They're sniffing around, trying to pierce the corporate veil. So, Nemesis is clean, anonymous." "Usually, yes," Yusuf said, "but one of their junior execs, a new hire, has been particularly persistent. Apparently, he flagged some minor anomaly in our initial incorporation paperwork. Something about the registered agent address being linked to a P.O. box that was once, very briefly, associated with a legal firm Naomi used years ago for a pro bono case. It's tenuous, almost invisible, but this kid is like a dog with a bone." He paused. "His name is Will." My blood turned to ice. Will, of course. His incompetence, for once, had led him to stumble onto something significant. He wouldn't know it was me, not yet. But if he dug deep enough, if he connected enough obscure dots, "What do we do?" I whispered, the implications crashing down on me. If Will uncovered my connection to Nemesis, my entire plan, everything I'd worked for, would be exposed. Beatrice would know. They would fight back, use their money and influence to crush me before I could even get close to the grand view. "We have two options," Yusuf said, his voice grim. "We fight them for the hotel, risk exposure, and hope this Will character gives up. Or we cut our losses. We pull out of the hotel deal, let Stonebridge have it, and create a diversion." Sacrifice the hotel? It was a profitable deal, one I'd spent months cultivating. Losing it would mean a financial hit, a step back. But the alternative? "The grand view is the prize, Yusuf," I said, my voice barely a breath. "Not this hotel." "I agree," he said. "So, we make a strategic retreat. We'll make it look like Nemesis overextended, got spooked by the competition. We leak some false information about internal financial instability, It'll cost us the deposit and some pride, but it should throw them off your scent. Will think he's scared off a minor player. His ego will be satisfied. It was a bitter pill to swallow, to deliberately sabotage my own deal, to lose money, to let Will think he'd won anything. But Yusuf was right. The Grandview was everything. We executed the plan flawlessly. Nemesis Properties withdrew its bid for the hotel, citing unforeseen market volatility. I even had Yusuf discreetly ensure a rumor reached Stonebridge Capital that Nemesis was a shaky amateur operation. A few days later, Naomi forwarded me an internal memo from Stonebridge that a contact had leaked to her. It was a commendation for a promising new executive, Will Diaz, whose sharp eye and diligent research saved the company from engaging in a risky bidding war with an unstable entity. I read it, a cold, humorless smile on my face. Let him have his small, accidental victory. Let him think he was a genius. It would make his eventual fall all the more satisfying. Yusuf called me that evening. The diversion worked. Stonebridge is patting themselves on the back, and Will is apparently their new golden boy. They're no longer looking at Nemesis. Good, I said, the adrenaline still coursing through me. The loss of the hotel deal stung, but the preservation of my ultimate goal was worth it. They're not just oblivious, Isabel, Yusuf warned, his voice serious. They're a liability to your plan if you get too close, even accidentally. The next time, you might not be so lucky to have a sacrificial lamb like that hotel. I nodded, staring out of Naomi's window at the glittering city lights, so many of them oblivious to the silent wars being waged within their walls. There won't be a next time for luck to decide, Yusuf. Only for me. My resolve was no longer just cold. It was forged in fire, tempered by sacrifice, and it was unbreakable. The months following the aborted hotel deal were a masterclass in patience and precision. I threw myself back into building Nemesis Properties, focusing on smaller, less conspicuous acquisitions. Each deal was a brick, carefully laid, strengthening my foundation, increasing my capital. Yusuf was an invaluable mentor, his calm guidance a steady hand on the tiller of my ambition. He taught me the art of the silent kill in business, how to gather intelligence, how to anticipate an opponent's move, how to strike when they least expected it. Harrison Ward is getting desperate, Yusuf informed me one crisp autumn morning over coffee. His lenders are tightening the screws. He's trying to offload the portfolio quietly, piece by piece, to avoid a public spectacle, but the wolves know he's wounded. The Grandview, however, he's holding on to that as a single prize. He thinks it's his golden parachute. When will it go on the market? I asked, my heart beginning a slow, steady thrum. This was the moment I'd been working towards, sacrificing for. Soon, Yusuf said, his eyes meeting mine. Very soon. And when it does, the bidding will be fierce. You'll be up against some of the biggest players in the city. Are you ready, Isabel? Was I ready? I thought of Beatrice's sneering face, Will's smug indifference, the cold humiliation of that motel room. I thought of the endless nights hunched over spreadsheets, the frugal meals, the constant fear of exposure. I was born ready for this, Yusuf, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The call came 2 weeks later, an encrypted message from one of Yusuf's most trusted sources. Ward Portfolio, Grandview Segment, invitation-only bidding, first round proposals due in 10 days. 10 days. My entire world narrowed to that single deadline. Naomi, bless her, took over all my freelance commitments. No questions asked, just a supportive squeeze of my arm and a promise to keep the coffee flowing. Yusuf and I worked around the clock in a small, anonymous office space he'd secured for Nemesis Properties. We dissected Ward's financials, analyzed the Grandview's occupancy rates, its operating costs, its potential for increased revenue through strategic improvements, a euphemism I particularly savored. The bidding process was brutal. Anonymous entities, shadowy investment groups, old money families, all vying for the prestigious Grandview. Our first offer, meticulously crafted, got us through to the second round. Then the third. Each stage was more intense, the numbers escalating, the pressure mounting. I barely slept, fueled by adrenaline and an almost terrifying single-mindedness. Beatrice's words echoed in my mind constantly. "You'll own nothing." Each keystroke on my laptop, each calculation, each strategic decision was a defiant rebuttal. The final round came down to Nemesis Properties and two other, much larger, more established firms. They had deeper pockets, more connections. But I had something they didn't. A burning, personal stake in this that went far beyond profit margins. "They'll try to outbid us purely on price," Yusuf warned as we prepared our final offer. "We need to be smarter. We need to offer Ward something more than just money." Our final proposal was audacious. We met Ward's asking price, but we also included a detailed, innovative plan for the Grandview's future. A plan that promised not just profit, but a revitalization of its slightly faded prestige. A plan that, ironically, incorporated many of the modernizing ideas I'd once timidly suggested to Beatrice for her endless charity galas, ideas she dismissed as too vulgar. We also structured the offer with a speed and efficiency that would appeal to a man desperate to staunch his financial bleeding. The day we submitted the final offer, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely sign my name, the anonymous, legally binding signature of the sole director of Nemesis Properties. I walked out of the office into the cold afternoon air, my nerves stretched so taut I felt like I might snap. I found myself standing across the street from the Grandview, its imposing facade gleaming in the weak sunlight. Beatrice and Will were in there, somewhere, living their oblivious, entitled lives, completely unaware that their gilded cage was about to have a new owner. The waiting was torture. Days crawled by. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. Naomi tried to distract me with movies and takeout, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying every detail of the offer, second-guessing every decision. Then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Naomi, but her voice was different, tight with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. "Isabel," she began, and then she paused. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. "What is it now? Just tell me." There was a beat of silence, and then her voice, clear and triumphant, broke through. "Isabel, Nemesis Properties got it. The building is yours." I sank into the nearest chair, the breath rushing out of me in a silent sob that was equal parts relief and a terrifying, exhilarating sense of power. I had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, I had actually done it. I hung up the phone, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across my face. It wasn't the manic grin of someone who'd won the lottery. It was colder, more deliberate, the smile of a predator who had finally cornered her prey. I walked to the window of Naomi's apartment, looking out over the sprawling city. My city now, in a way it had never been before. The Grandview towers stood proud in the distance, a beacon of their arrogance. My arrogance now. "Checkmate, Beatrice," I whispered, the words tasting like the sweetest victory. "Your queen is about to be evicted by a worthless pawn." The game wasn't just won. It was about to be gloriously, satisfyingly concluded. The days following the acquisition were a whirlwind of legalities and logistics. But my focus was singular. Apartment 12B. Beatrice and Will's opulent prison. My prize. My first official act as the new, silent owner of the Grandview Towers was to summon Randy Arnold, the building manager. He was a man in his mid-40s, professional, discreet, and, I suspected, thoroughly tired of Beatrice's imperious demands. I'd observed him during my catering reconnaissance missions. He'd always treated the staff with a quiet respect Beatrice reserved for no one. We met in the Grandview's plush, underused business center. I didn't introduce myself by name, not yet. I was simply the representative of Nemesis Properties. Randy was polite, wary, clearly wondering what kind of new overlord he'd be dealing with. Mr. Arnold, I began, my voice cool and businesslike, Nemesis Properties has ambitious plans for the Grandview. Extensive renovations, upgrades to all common areas, and a modernization of several underperforming units. I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Your current employment is secure. In fact, we're prepared to offer you a significant increase in salary and a bonus structure tied to the successful rollout of these changes. His eyebrows rose slightly. I named a figure that I knew was well above his current compensation. He blinked. That's very generous, madam. We value loyalty and efficiency, Mr. Arnold, I said. Your first task will be to oversee the issuance of termination notices for certain leases. Due to the scale of the upcoming renovations, a number of tenants will need to vacate. I slid a folder across the polished mahogany table. All the necessary paperwork is here. Standard 30-day notices. You will deliver them personally. He opened the folder, his professional gaze scanning the list. Then he stopped. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly as they landed on one particular entry. Apartment 12B. Occupants, Will and Beatrice Diaz. He looked up at me, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Surprise, understanding, perhaps even a touch of grim satisfaction. Apartment 12B, I said, my voice devoid of emotion, will receive their notice today, personally signed by me on behalf of Nemesis Properties. I pushed a single crisp envelope towards him. It contained their eviction notice, the ink of my anonymous signature still sharp. Later that afternoon, I sat in a discreetly parked car across the street, Naomi beside me, her hand resting reassuringly on my arm. We watched as Randy Arnold, looking impassive, entered the Grandview. The wait felt like an eternity. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Randy. 12B delivered. Initial reaction, disbelief, escalating to vocal displeasure. A cold smile touched my lips. Showtime, I murmured to Naomi. I'd chosen my outfit with care. Not rags, not the drab uniform of a caterer. A sharply tailored power suit in a deep charcoal gray, heels that clicked with authority on the marble floor, my hair styled, my makeup flawless. I was no longer the discarded wife. I was the landlord. As I stepped out of the elevator on the 12th floor, I could already hear Beatrice's voice, shrill and furious, echoing down the hallway. Utterly preposterous. Randy, you must have made a mistake. Call Harrison Ward immediately. He wouldn't dare. I paused outside their door, savoring the moment. Then I knocked. A sharp, decisive rap. The door was flung open by a frantic-looking Will. His hair was disheveled, his usually smug face pale and slack-jawed. He stared at me, his eyes widening in stunned, horrified recognition. Isabel? What are you doing here? Behind him, Beatrice appeared, her face a mask of apoplectic rage. Who is it, Will? Is it that incompetent Arnold again with his ridiculous... Her voice died in her throat as she saw me. Her jaw literally dropped. Sienna, looking pale and bewildered, hovered in the background like a frightened deer. Hello, Will. Beatrice, I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. I stepped past Will into their foyer, my gaze sweeping over the familiar, ostentatious decor. Lovely apartment, though I think it could use a few renovations. Beatrice found her voice, a strangled shriek. You, what is the meaning of this? How dare you show your face here? I believe I own the place now, I said, allowing myself a small, knowing smile. Nemesis Properties. You see, that's me. Will looked like he was about to faint. Nemesis, but the hotel deal. You thought you were so clever, didn't you, Will? I said, my voice still soft. Such a sharp eye for business. Tell me, how's that golden boy status working out for you? Beatrice's face was turning an alarming shade of purple. You can't do this. This is our home. You worthless little nobody. You can't just throw us out. My smile widened. It was the same smile I'd given them as the elevator doors closed on me all those months ago. I believe I just did. As you once said, Beatrice. I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Some people are just worthless tenants. Her eyes bulged. For a moment, I thought she might actually have a stroke. She opened her mouth, but only a choked gasp came out. Sienna started to cry softly. Will just stared, his arrogance completely shattered, replaced by a dawning, sickening understanding. I savored their ruin, the utter devastation on their faces. It was everything I had dreamed of, and more. The cold satisfaction was a balm to the wounds they had inflicted. I turned to leave, my heels clicking decisively on their precious marble. As Beatrice finally collapsed into a sputtering, hysterical heap on a silk-upholstered settee, and Will stared blankly at the eviction notice still clutched in his hand, I paused at their doorway. Oh, and Will, I said, my voice soft but carrying like a whip crack in the sudden silence. Tell Sienna I hope she enjoys house hunting. I hear the market is brutal for those who suddenly find themselves on the streets. I didn't look back. The echo of Beatrice's renewed wails was music to my ears. The fallout was swift and deliciously public, exactly as I'd anticipated. News of the Grandview's new, mysterious owner and the subsequent eviction of one of its most prominent and loudest tenants spread through their social circle like wildfire. Randy, true to his word and newly incentivized salary, handled the transition with professional detachment, which only seemed to infuriate Beatrice more. Will and Beatrice's move was a spectacle of humiliation. Movers, not the discreet white glove service they were accustomed to, but a budget crew I'd, anonymously through Nemesis, recommended via Randy, grumbled as they hauled out gaudy furniture and countless boxes labeled fragile, priceless. Beatrice, I heard from a gleeful Naomi who'd casually strolled by the building that day, had a full-blown meltdown on the sidewalk, shrieking at the movers, at Will, at the indifferent city pigeons. Will apparently just looked gray and defeated. Their society friends, the ones who had fawned over Beatrice and tolerated Will, vanished like mist. Suddenly, association with them was toxic. No one wanted to be seen offering sanctuary to the couple so spectacularly dethroned. Sienna, true to my prediction, didn't stick around for the house hunting. Within a week of the eviction notice, her engagement ring was off, her social media scrubbed of Will's existence, and whispers circulated that her family was already lining up more suitable prospects. Collateral damage, perhaps, but she'd hitched her wagon to a falling star. I didn't move into their old apartment, 12B. The thought of sleeping in their bed, even after a thorough cleansing, was distasteful. Instead, I selected the Grandview's true penthouse, a sprawling apartment on the top floor that Harrison Ward had kept for himself, a space even grander, with panoramic views that made Beatrice's former domain look like a servant's quarters. The renovations began immediately, not just for show, but to truly transform the building into something reflecting my own taste, sleek, modern, understated power. A few weeks after the eviction, Naomi and Yusuf joined me on my new, expansive balcony. The city glittered below us, a carpet of diamonds. We clinked champagne glasses. To Nemesis Properties, Naomi said, her eyes sparkling with pride and a touch of awe, and to its rather formidable CEO, Yusuf smiled, a rare, wide grin. You played a long game, Isabel, and you played it brilliantly. Harrison Ward, by the way, is surprisingly relieved. Said Nemesis was the only bidder who treated him with a modicum of respect, even while driving a hard bargain. He got a fair price, I said, shrugging. Unlike some people. What about them? Naomi asked, her voice softer. Will and Beatrice? Any word? Randy mentioned they found a small rental in a less Prestigious neighborhood, I said, swirling the champagne in my glass. Apparently, Beatrice is finding co-op board interviews rather challenging without her usual leverage. And well, Stonebridge Capital quietly let him go. Seems his sharp eye wasn't so valued when his family name lost its luster. There was a comfortable silence for a moment. The city's hum a distant soundtrack. Are you happy, Izzy? Naomi asked, her gaze searching. I mean, truly? I looked out at the endless expanse of lights. Happy? It wasn't the giggling, carefree happiness of my youth. This was something different. A profound, almost chilling satisfaction. A sense of order restored, of scales brutally, but justly rebalanced. I hadn't found forgiveness, nor had I sought it. I hadn't found redemption in the traditional sense. I had found power. I had found vindication. I am content, Naomi, I said finally, deeply content. They tried to erase me. Instead, I rewrote their entire narrative. Yusuf nodded slowly. You've changed, Isabel. This path, it hardens a person. It does, I agreed without apology. But I was soft before, and look where it got me. I prefer the view from up here, with a bit of steel in my spine. I held up the deed to the grand view, a simple document that represented so much more than just property. It was a testament to resilience, to the potent force of a woman scorned and underestimated. The old Isabel, the one who cried over Beatrice's casual cruelties and sought Will's elusive approval, was gone. In her place stood someone else, someone forged in betrayal and tempered by revenge, someone who understood the stark, satisfying consequences of karma when delivered with precision and unwavering resolve. They said I'd own nothing, I thought, the city lights glittering below me like scattered jewels, each one a tiny spark in the vast darkness. They were wrong. I took a slow sip of champagne, the bubbles bursting on my tongue like tiny celebratory explosions. I own their past, their present, and any future they dared to imagine without me. And it's a beautiful view. The empress of my own making, indeed. And from this vantage point, the world looked full of possibilities. My possibilities.